They're not texting you at 2 a.m. because they love you. They're texting because their favorite puppet isn't dancing anymore, and that terrifies them more than losing you ever could. Listen to me carefully. The narcissist doesn't miss your laugh, your warmth, or the way you used to light up when they walked into a room. They miss the version of you that said yes when you meant no, that apologized for their mistakes, that twisted yourself into impossible shapes just to earn scraps of their attention. If you're watching this and your heart is pounding because this feels too real, hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments, what's the hardest boundary you've had to set? I read every single comment, and your courage might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Here's what Carl Rogers taught us about unconditional positive regard. Real love accepts you as you are, not as a project to be controlled. But narcissists don't love people, they collect them. You were never their partner. You were their emotional supply, their validation machine, their personal audience of one. And when you finally stopped clapping, when you finally stopped feeding their endless hunger for control, that's when they panicked. Not because they lost love, because they lost power. You think they're reaching out because they realized your worth? No, they're reaching out because someone else isn't filling that specific role you played. You weren't just anyone to them. You were the one who made them feel like a god while you disappeared into nothing. The hoovering, the love bombing, the sudden, I miss you messages. This isn't love returning. This is control trying to reinstall itself. They're not saying, I can't live without you. They're saying, I can't control my world without you in it. Rogers also understood that healthy relationships happen between two whole people, not between a person and their shadow. But you became a shadow, didn't you? You learned to read their moods like weather patterns. You learned to apologize for existing too loudly. You learned that love meant erasing yourself until you fit perfectly into their vision of what you should be. And now they want you back. Not because they've changed, but because whoever replaced you isn't as well trained. They're not as willing to sacrifice their soul for breadcrumbs of affection. Here's the truth that will set you free, even though it hurts. They don't miss you. They miss what you did for them. They miss how small you made yourself so they could feel big. They miss how you absorbed their anger, their insecurity, their endless need to be right about everything. But you know what? That version of you that they miss, she was dying, that version of you that said yes to everything, that walked on eggshells, that believed love meant suffering. She was suffocating under the weight of someone else's broken ego. When they left, or when you finally found the strength to leave, that wasn't abandonment. That was resurrection. You didn't lose love. You stopped participating in emotional abuse disguised as romance. The narcissist taught you that love is conditional, that you have to earn it through perfect behavior, through silence, through making yourself smaller and smaller until you disappeared. But Rogers knew better. He knew that true acceptance, true love, doesn't require you to be anyone other than who you are. You spent so long believing their version of love that you forgot what real love feels like. Real love doesn't leave you walking on eggshells. Real love doesn't make you question your sanity. Real love doesn't require you to become someone else to be worthy of staying. They don't miss you. They miss their control over you. And that's exactly why you should never go back. Let me tell you what really happened in that relationship. You thought you were loving someone, but love is not performing, and that's all you ever did for them. You performed happiness when you were breaking inside. You performed understanding when they made no sense. You performed forgiveness for things that were unforgivable. Carl Rogers called it the actualizing tendency, the human drive toward growth and wholeness. But narcissists don't want you whole. They want you broken just enough to need them, but functional enough to serve them. They want you hungry for their approval, but never quite fed. You became addicted to the intermittent reinforcement, the occasional kindness after days of coldness, the rare I love you after weeks of criticism. Your brain learned to crave those tiny hits of validation the same way a gambler craves the slot machine jackpot. And they knew exactly what they were doing. Every time you tried to leave, they gave you just enough hope to stay. Every time you started to heal, they reopened the wound with a perfectly timed gesture of false intimacy. But here's what they never expected. You would learn to miss yourself more than you miss them. The woman who laughs freely, who speaks her mind, who doesn't apologize for taking up space, they couldn't tolerate her So they convinced you she was too much, too difficult, too demanding. They convinced you that love meant shrinking. But shrinking isn't love, silence isn't peace, and walking on eggshells isn't dancing. You think they want you back because they realized you were irreplaceable? Listen carefully. You were never replaceable because you were never really seen. You were a role, not a person. You were a function, not a human being. The narcissist doesn't miss your Tuesday morning coffee routine or the way you hummed in the shower. They miss how those things made them feel powerful. They miss the control, the predictability, the way you orbited around their needs like a devoted planet around a dying star. When you finally stopped orbiting, when you finally broke free from their gravitational pull, they didn't feel loss. They felt rage. Because healthy people don't rage when they lose love. They grieve. But narcissists don't grieve people, they rage at lost possessions. You were never their love. You were their supply. And supply is replaceable, which is exactly why they're frantically trying to get you back while simultaneously lining up your replacement. The person you're becoming now, the one who recognizes manipulation, who sets boundaries, who chooses peace over chaos, they can't control that person. That person threatens everything they've built their identity around. That person knows the difference between love and obsession, between passion and possession, between being chosen and being trapped. So when they text you at 2 a.m., when they show up unannounced, when they promise they've changed, remember this moment. Remember that people who truly love you don't need to convince you of it through manipulation tactics learned from a psychological warfare manual. Remember that you are not responsible for managing someone else's emotions. You are not required to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. You are not obligated to shrink so someone else can feel tall. The narcissist doesn't miss you. They miss their power over you. They miss the version of you that believed their lies about love. They miss the version of you that thought trauma bonding was deep connection. But that version of you is gone. And good riddance. The woman you're becoming doesn't need to be chosen to know her worth. She doesn't need external validation to know she's valuable. She doesn't need someone else's approval to take up space in this world. This is what Rogers meant by self-actualization, becoming who you truly are, not who someone else needs you to be. The narcissist was terrified of your authentic self because authentic people can't be controlled. They can't be manipulated. They can't be convinced that abuse is love. Your authentic self knows that real love doesn't require you to lose yourself to find it. Real love doesn't demand that you become smaller so someone else can feel bigger. Real love doesn't ask you to silence your voice so someone else can be the only one speaking. The reason they're so desperate to get you back isn't because they've suddenly realized your worth. It's because they've realized they can't find anyone else willing to disappear the way you did. They can't find anyone else so perfectly trained to absorb their anger, manage their emotions, and ask for nothing in return. You were the perfect victim because you believed love was supposed to hurt. You believed that if it wasn't hard, it wasn't real. You believed that suffering for someone meant you loved them more deeply than anyone else ever could. But suffering isn't love. Enduring abuse isn't loyalty. And accepting crumbs isn't gratitude. It's starvation. The texts, the calls, the surprise visits, they're not romantic gestures. They're power moves from someone who has lost their favorite source of control. They're desperate attempts to reinstall the old program where you were the giver and they were the taker, where you were the one who compromised and they were the one who was accommodated. Don't mistake their desperation for love. Don't confuse their need for your devotion. They don't miss your heart. They miss your servitude. And the fact that they can't have her back, that's not your loss, that's your victory, that's your freedom, that's your life beginning again.